characterized by their elaborate patterns and peculiar forms, bear a striking resemblance to what modern culture often depicts as extraterrestrial beings. With large, bulging eyes and elongated heads, these figures seem to echo the descriptions of alien beings reported in countless modern.
Why do we have the most massive of constructions in the far and distant past? Well, and according to the ancient texts and the ancient traditions, this knowledge was given to our ancestors by the gods.
A top-secret exchange program between the United States government and planet Serpo, located in the Zeta Reticuli star system, aka the planet of the short grays. The project was allegedly created under the administration of President John F. Kennedy after the US government saved the life of an alien, EVA-1, who crash-landed on Earth back in 1947. Entirely grateful and forever indebted to humanity, the alien began working with the US government and teaching them about his home planet, Serpo. When EVA-1 died, he left behind communications technology, which the government then used to eventually get into contact with other Serpo natives. That is when the government made arrangements to send 12 specially trained astronauts to planet Serpo so that they may learn about life outside of our atmosphere. In order to reach Serpo, the 12 astronauts had to travel through a wormhole, after which the majority of them got sick and one unfortunately died of an aneurysm. But of course they kept going and eventually they reached the alien planet. For a decade they studied life on Serpo before returning home and assuming entirely new identities in order to protect the security of the mission. Fair enough, I suppose.
So what are the origins of this Project Serpo tale? Well, like with most conspiracies in the modern age, it started gaining popularity online and took off from there. It all started in 2005 when a series of anonymous emails began circulating among UFO researchers and enthusiasts. These emails, which were allegedly from a retired US government official who remained anonymous, laid out this insane story about an extraterrestrial exchange program. We'll talk more about this anonymous individual later. The Project Serpo story started making the rounds way faster than these types of stories would have back in the day. It was 2005, the internet was still relatively new in the grand scheme of things anyway, and the UFO community was just hungry for new sensational stories. And this one, it's pretty much the definition of sensational.
Remember that alien that I mentioned, EVA-1, that crash-landed to Earth in 1947? Yeah, well that was actually the Roswell incident of 1947, and also the first time the US government supposedly made contact with aliens. As many of you are probably already aware, in 1947 an unidentified object crash-landed on some farmland in Roswell, New Mexico. When Area 51 was alerted of the incident, they rushed to the scene, collected the object, and released a statement saying that what had come spiraling down to Earth a few nights prior was nothing more than a weather balloon. But then they sent the object out to another base for testing, and another, and another. Why? Well, because it wasn't actually a weather balloon. It was an alien spacecraft containing 6 aliens, 5 of which had died in the crash, and one of which came to be known as Extraterrestrial Biological Entity Number 1, or EVA-1. EVA-1 was taken to the Air Force facility in Los Alamos, where he stayed until his death in 1952. During this time, he learned to communicate with the military and told them some pretty interesting things.
Now, if the US government is really working with these alien beings, where might they be carrying out their activities? Area 51? Some hidden base in Antarctica? Well, some say they could be operating from an even more top secret place. Dulce Base. Dulce Base supposedly sits deep beneath the Colorado-New Mexico border, close to Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce Base is said to be a secret facility where humans and aliens are working together, exchanging ideas and doing all sorts of experiments. Multiple levels deep underground with high-tech labs. The rumors are that different alien species, from the Greys, from planet Serpo possibly, to the reptilians, are working hand in hand with the US government. As to what they're trying to accomplish, probably something really fun and good that we don't really need to bother worrying about. Stories about this place really started coming about from a man named Paul Benowitz, who claimed to have discovered an underground base near Dulce, full of gray aliens and humans. His claims caught a lot of attention, but Benowitz's mental health eventually declined, and he ended up in a mental hospital, passed away in 2003. And there's always been this rumor that he was part of a big, widespread misinformation campaign.
As I said, during EBA 1's time on Earth, he informed the US government of quite a few things. One being that Serpo natives, Ebans as they are referred to by humans, had actually been visiting Earth for the last 2,000 years with no issue. But unfortunately, this time new Earth radar technology that they don't have on Serpo caused the ship to go haywire and crash, killing the majority of the crew. In 1949, a similar thing happened. 6 Ebans crash landed, but this time unfortunately none of them made it. When the ship was examined, the military found a communications device, which they worked on with EBA 1 to repair. They got it working and sent out multiple distress signals, but it wasn't until after EBA 1's death in 1952 that they finally got a reply. Communications began between the US military and the Ebans. It took a while, but eventually they were able to understand one another. After learning about the 12 deceased Ebans stranded on Earth, the Ebans asked if they could come to Earth and retrieve the bodies. Of course, the military wanted something in return, so they came up with the exchange program. The military wanted tech, but the Ebans said, no, you're not ready for our tech. And so they proposed something else. In exchange for the bodies of their deceased, 12 astronauts could spend a decade on planet Serpo. Furthermore, an Eban would stay on Earth to assist the military. In 1964, the Ebans landed on Earth once again to retrieve the bodies, and Project Serpo, aka Project Crystal Night, as it has also been called, commenced.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the New Jersey UFO. This UFO sighting took place in 2001 just above the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, just after midnight, for around 15 minutes, motorists driving down the highway stopped to stare at the sky to witness what no one could believe. There were strange orange and yellow lights in a V formation just above the Arthur Kill waterway. There were a ton of witnesses who were all extremely confused and shocked as to what they were seeing. Air traffic controllers initially denied that there were any flying objects that could have caused the mysterious lights, but a group called the New York Strange Phenomena investigators claimed that they received radar data that night that could corroborate all of the stories that the witnesses were telling. It may not have been aliens, but it certainly was some sort of unidentified flying object that no one had ever seen before, and there were people from all walks of life witnessing it together. In our number 9 spot today, we have habitable planets. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. So we once were on a journey to start off by figuring out which planets were actually habitable. And by that I mean which planets were rocky and which were orbiting a star within what is called the Goldilocks zone and had water, and that they weren't too hot or too cold so that water could be in liquid form. It just seems like the absolute basics needed in order to sustain life. Well, now, after more years of research, it is thought that actually about 1 in every 5 or 6 planets is actually a planet that could potentially sustain life. It is thought that there is roughly about 1 exoplanet for every star in our galaxy. That's a lot of planets, which means that's a lot of planets that could potentially have life. There certainly are planets that researchers believe are the most likely, but that doesn't mean that they are the only ones that should be looked into. Basically, what I'm saying is that there are, at the very least, millions of planets that could be hosting some form of life, whether it's an intelligent civilization or just single-cell organisms that have the potential to evolve over millions of years, just like us. Any kind of life would be a huge and exciting win for the science community, so it's just a reminder to us to keep searching, because we never know what we're going to find. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide. But the craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for human civilization. I want you guys to let me know in the comments if you believe the story that the government told, or if you trust the instincts of the people in Stephenville who saw that incident that day. In our number 7 spot today, we have time. This one is basically just the theory that we may not have found aliens yet because we haven't spent enough time looking for them. Realistically, it's been about half a century since we really gained the technological advancements that have allowed us to really look for them. In terms of the universe, that is the smallest little blink of an eye. Things take time, and it's incredibly possible that we just haven't had enough of it yet. Every year, as more money gets put into things like that, it allows incredibly smart and brilliant people the opportunity to create things that unbelievably make space more and more accessible to us. The more accessible it is, the more we will be able to discover. So maybe this is just a lesson in patience for all of us. If aliens do exist, I'm sure we'll find them at some point. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because I personally would like to meet an alien, but since I'm not an astronaut, I might have to wait a little longer than I'd like to. In our number 6 spot today, we have this unexplained UFO. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. There weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using a Raytheon Advanced Targeting forward-looking infrared pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington. Something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have 2 commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane, and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like 2 large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently 2 beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the mysterious beam. signatures of phosphine in a cloud that had a similar temperature and pressure to Earth, and while this isn't concrete evidence of space bugs, it will there has actually been the discovery of a planet that is floating around a black hole. The forces around the hole are also providing heat for the planet as well, but there is one catch, and that is the fact that the planet needs to orbit at the speed of light. This would mean that a second on that planet would be hours on ours, which is kind of difficult to comprehend. The planet would have to be in what is called the Goldilocks zone though, because if it's too far from the black hole, it'll be too cold and there won't be any liquid water, but if it's too close, it will of course be sucked into the black hole by the gravitational forces. It's definitely a pretty crazy idea, but it is possible that there could be some life in this situation.
I don't think any alien conspiracy theory would be complete without talking about Area 51. For those of you guys who have been living under a rock, I'm here to help you. Well, Area 51 is a US Air Force military installation that is located in Nevada. It is not accessible to the public and it is under 24-hour surveillance. Back in 1989, a man by the name of Robert Lazar testified that he worked on extraterrestrial technology inside of Area 51. He also told reporters that he saw autopsy pictures of aliens inside of the building and that the US government used Area 51 to examine recovered alien spacecrafts. Many people have reported that they've seen UFOs flying in or near Area 51. The US government has not provided the public with any information about what research is going on here, and that has left us with a lot of questions. But get this, the Pentagon officially confirmed that there was a $22 million government program that collected and analyzed aerospace threats, which could be a fancy way of saying that they studied UFOs. And now, flying into number 9, we're talking about Roswell. This is probably one of the most popular UFO incidents that has ever happened in the United States. Back in the summer of 1947, an unidentified flying object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. People nearby reported that the flying object looked like a flying disc, and the US military released a statement saying that one of the objects was actually a weather balloon. But the public wasn't buying that, and a ton of conspiracy theories started to spread. People claimed that one or more alien spacecrafts has crash landed and that the aliens were taken by military to be studied at Area 51, and this whole thing is a massive cover-up. this question brings us to number 6. I'm gonna say that this question applies to the majority of us. Of course, there are a bunch of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, so obviously this question doesn't apply to them. So let me ask you again, why haven't we met aliens yet? According to one theory, they believe that aliens have been around for much longer than us, which means that they have been evolving and adapting much longer than humans. So despite what Hollywood wants us to believe, aliens probably aren't these green, slimy creatures with big heads. They probably evolved into highly intelligent creatures and we don't even realize that we're living among them. Maybe we're just living in one giant ball and aliens are studying our every move. It's like the Truman Show. And we're all Truman.
Number 10, James Webb and the Big Bang. Okay, here we go. We'll kick off with some recent news. The James Webb Space Telescope has, of course, been blowing our minds casually for a couple years now. Since his departure up into space back in 2021, James Webb Space Telescope has been showing us these beautiful displays that we never dreamt of ever seeing. Stars so faint and so far away that until this point, well, we had no idea they were even there. For example, last week, the James Webb Space Telescope found new, well, rather old, galaxies that look like tiny red spots. Now, by analyzing the light emitted by these galaxies, astronomers can conclude that these galaxies were born 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang. Now, these galaxies shouldn't be this old, this far away, considering they were born so soon after the Big Bang. Doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be that old. It's like seeing your grandma younger than you somehow. You're like, no. Timeline-wise, that shouldn't make any sense. What in the Avengers is going on? Are these aliens before the Big Bang? We have no idea. This is a week ago. Comment your thoughts down below. I think it's aliens for sure. Number 9, ancient Sumerians. All right, we'll go old, but not as old as that red dot. The Mesopotamian civilization was formed in what's now Iraq and Kuwait. Now, these civilizations began around the Neolithic Revolution, so somewhere around 12,000 BCE. Now, they're sometimes referred to as the cradle of civilization because, of course, they're old. Mesopotamia was one of the first places to develop agriculture, being right in the middle of Egyptian and the Indus Valley civilizations. And of course, we have to mention these ancient Sumerian tablets. Now, in these tablets, we start to question history. In 1842, British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard discovered ruins of this royal archive. Thousands of tablets made of clay. The world's oldest overdue library books, pretty much. Now, these tablets showed Sumerians engaging in a social night with a scene that depicts a banquet from around 26,000 BC. It was the world's first bender, actually, if I'm being historically accurate. Ancient gods of Mesopotamia were said to have wings and the ability to control all of humanity. These gods were 8 feet tall, or they could have been aliens from another planet. Again, we don't know. Could be gods, could be aliens, could be neither. Drawings of a very tall man, like me, who knows. The Sumerians wrote one of the oldest tales in human history. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. So maybe these alien gods inspired them and inspired literature. Who knows? I'd probably write a book if 8 foot tall winged gods landed on my crops for sure. I'd write a journal or two. Number 8, the Madonna with Saint Giovanni. All right, going back to some art for this one. In our history, even in our ancient history, there have been writings and paintings of the, well, potential extraterrestrial variety. As one example shows, the 15th century painting, the Madonna with the Saint Giovanni, depicts the Virgin Mary. Also, in the background of this painting, features some sort of hovering disc-like object that looks a lot like a UFO. No? I don't know. I can't really describe this. This isn't the only example, however, as we've seen other sorts of otherworldly beings in ancient cave paintings and other Sanskrit scrolls. There are even some people who swear that it's also written in the book of Ezekiel. Aliens are pretty OG. It certainly says something that potential alien sightings have existed since, well, that far back in our human history, so it must either point to proof of alien existence or just humans being obsessed with conspiracies of alien existence. I'm on the latter side. I really want aliens to be real, but I don't think so. I don't know. Number 7, the Nazca lines. We've all heard of alien crop circles at one point or another. I remember watching the movie Signs when I was younger, and well, then I couldn't sleep for 28 years. That's awesome. That birthday party scene? Never again. Thank you so much. Yeah, that scene. Remember that one? So scary, right? Aliens. Just 200 miles southeast of Peru, we can find hundreds of markings etched into the earth. Now, they're massive pieces of art, almost like crop circles, but, without the farming stuff. More intimidating, more, stone. The biggest ground graffiti spans over 1,200 feet, and you've probably seen it, hopefully not. Many believe that this was an ancient ritual for water. Given its location, well, that theory certainly checks out. Another theory written in 1968 Tate and Eric von Daniken's book, Chariot of the Gods, suggests that ancient Nazca Lines was a site for ancient alien visitors. Like a landing pad almost. Airport, there it is, one of those. Leaving behind knowledge in the form of these massive doodles and, well, technology. Number 6, the USS Nimitz. Alright, I couldn't imagine a worse place to find alien life than in the middle of the ocean. Ugh, that's creepy. Although I will argue that an octopus is completely alien. That's messed up, they shouldn't exist. November 2004, the USS Princeton is a part of the USS Nimitz strike group, and they noted this craft, a UFO, a UAP rather, that's what they're calling them now, UAP. Now at first they saw this craft not in the sky, but under the sea, which is interesting because the Go Fast video that we've always been looking at with that thing whipping through the air seems like it's coming from the ocean. The ocean is very unexplored, so there could be a plethora of aliens just waiting down there. Who knows? I certainly hope not, but who knows? A few moments later, this white tic-tac shaped alien craft came out of the water, and a white tic-tac shaped UAP, always egg-shaped in history, that's always a fun sign. Then 2 FA-18 fighter jets were flying above it, and as earlier reports put the egg 80,000 feet above the water, so of course that's when they had to fly in. They saw it fly up, whip through the air, and then again, they saw it dip into the ocean with no exhaust, no infrared, didn't pick up anything, nothing like that at all. It just shot away at 3 times the speed of sound, underwater, gone. Can aliens go underwater too? That's a little bit OP, it's not fair. Number 5, Oumuamua. This one here has scientists and Reddit users all fighting alike. So just a few years ago, scientists all agreed that we had found an object that was flying through our solar system, and they called it Oumuamua. It was widely agreed upon that it was an interstellar comet that had somehow swung out from another star and ended up near us at a very high velocity. But upon closer examination, they realized that something was propelling this and causing it to accelerate, and this is when the debate started. A.V. Loeb, who is a Harvard University astrophysicist, proposed the idea that rather than a comet, this could be an alien probe that is being pushed by a light sail. A light sail is a very wide but extremely thin piece of material that could be accelerating this, space cigar. Other scientists didn't agree with this. Fair, I mean more than fair. And instead they believed that this is possibly the hydrogen ice could have been melting off the object in a way that would mimic a rocket or something that can propel it in nature. But in August of last year, A.V. wrote in a study that hydrogen ice is too easily heated and it would have melted off long before this, long before it reached our solar system. So really don't know what's propelling this massive space cigar. So we think aliens. Do I think aliens? Maybe. I don't know. I'll never tell. Number 4, Flaming Thing, Texas. I just watched Nope the other day, and the idea of aliens in Texas or aliens over top of a farm, that birthday party scene with the dude walking, it always gives me chills. I don't like it. Aliens love a good crop, apparently. Imagine opening the newspaper though in 1957, and right on the front cover you read, Levelin Flaming Thing brings world knocking at city's door. What does that even mean? How do I react to that? Back in 1957 in, of course, Levelin, Texas, multiple eyewitness reports began to flood in about an egg-shaped object, again, an egg-shaped object, or this circular flash of light. It was just jetting across Levelin skies. One witness recalls the object making a loud humming noise as it flew by, which is different than other accounts that we've heard about, flying eggs in history. But this egg shape keeps coming back up. But this is an encounter where it's been reported as loud with a great rush of wind, which is, again, very different. Believable, but different. It was a loud egg as opposed to a quiet sea egg. On top of that claim, the witness's car radio began to go haywire as it passed. The radio thing isn't too crazy. I mean, growing up, my computer speakers would always tell me if a text was going to come in. It's always so odd. I have no idea how that works still to this day. The Air Force ended up commenting on it. They said that this was just a phenomenon caused by electrical storms and not a space egg passing by. But do we buy that? Is that why we're here right now watching this video on Most Amazing Top 10? Giving it a thumbs up, subscribing? We want to believe in aliens, right? Let's do it. Let's move on. Almost there. Number 3, Europa. One of Jupiter's many moons, called Europa, has a red tinge to it. And in 2001, NASA scientists revealed that this tinge, this little might be possible that alien microbes are responsible for this reddish color. Again, we saw life way out in the galaxy that was also a faint red, so red means dead? I don't know, red means alive? Who knows? The surface of this moon is mostly ice, but it has been shown that it reflects infrared radiation in a bizarre way. This means that something is binding it together, but researchers haven't been able to come up with the correct combination of elements and or compounds to make that data make any sense. They're like, something's red and there's life. Well, I don't know how science works. That's my best impersonation of science people. There's some bacteria on Earth that can thrive in extreme conditions and that also have that red and brown color, which could potentially be responsible for this color on the moon. Sort of space bacteria, ice bacteria, whatever. There's something living up there. The surface temperature might be too cold for them to survive, but the warmer interior might be where these are all located. Some geological activity on the moon could push them closer to the surface, where they then flash frozen in place. So they're warm under the water, then they go, huh, and they freeze. It's a horrible way to go out. A little space bacteria. Number 2, O'Hare Airport. A UAP spotted in the airport. Worst place to see it, in my opinion. Are you sure it wasn't an airplane? Heard there's a few over there. The day was November 7th and the year was 2006. Flight 446 was gearing up with passengers and luggage, of course, ready to fly to North Carolina from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. But the flight was a tad delayed due to the hovering metallic craft hovering above all the planes. Yeah, can't really take off when that shiny ball's in the way. 12 United employees and others were just there to fly out. It was 4:15 p.m., so it wasn't at midnight. Nobody was tired. Nobody was delirious. It was clear as day. It was a business day, otherwise. And everyone saw this. Witnesses watched it hover for around 5 minutes before it eventually zipped off back into the sky. It even pushed through clouds, so people say it wasn't a balloon. This report was one of the most read stories on the Chicago Tribune's website. I mean, of course, it's about aliens. But eventually it was deemed a weather phenomenon, because, why, of course it was, wasn't it? The UFO was not seen on the radar, or any radar for that matter, so now we're just gonna go off what people said that many years ago. Although last week we saw 3 balloons and have no idea what they were, so we'll never find out at this rate. And finally, number 1, 2021 UFO. February 21st, 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the feed from an aircraft, but they received much more than they ever expected. They intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time, it seems. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:20 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask a question. Do we have any targets up here? Also, what an odd question to ask while you're flying. The voice continued, we just had something go right over top of us. Now after this, he followed up with, I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast over top of us flying. Yeah, not where you want to see anything in the air around you. You don't want to see anything that looks like that in the air. No, that's so scary. Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still haven't been able to identify what that could have been. Just a rogue something flying by. Nice, that's calming. Glad I went flying yesterday. This does happen more often than any of us really know. Like I said, we had 3 balloons pop up and we have no idea where half of them went or what happened to them. But it's possible this object could have been part of some sort of covert military or Navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells. We don't want to do any tests beside a swoosh airline. Probably not dangerous. Dangerous? Probably not safe.
Secret alien base breaks onto this list at number 5. Have you ever wondered what's on the dark side of the moon? Well, there are a bunch of conspiracy theories about a secret alien base that is located there. In 1976, the Apollo 20 mission went to explore the dark side of the moon. And apparently they found an alien spacecraft embedded into the moon's surface. I mean, take a look at these pictures right here. What do you guys think this is? People are claiming that this is proof that either an alien spacecraft crashed here, or there is a gigantic alien base set up on the moon. I guess having a base there would make it highly convenient for aliens to make day trips to Earth. Up next, number 4, we have the infamous Diet Love incident. Traveling back to January 1959, 9 college students were brutally murdered under extremely mysterious circumstances. And this is while they were hiking through the mountains. When investigators arrived at the scene, they saw that the tent had been cut open from the inside and most of their stuff had been left behind. The first 5 bodies were found and the cause of death was hyperthermia. But the next 4 bodies were found 2 months later and their deaths were very mysterious. One of them had significant damage to his skull and the other one had major chest fractures that can only be caused by a super strong force. One of the bodies was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. Some of her facial tissue and a fragment of her skull was gone as well. Experts can't determine what really happened while they were hiking, which makes people believe that aliens are responsible for these 9 deaths. Reptilians crawl onto this list at number 3. This conspiracy theory is probably one of my favorites. Apparently they are blood-drinking, flesh-eating, shape-shifting, extraterrestrial reptilian humans with only one objective. They want to enslave the human race, of course. These reptilians are our world leaders, corporate executives, and even celebrities. They are responsible for the Holocaust, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the 9/11 attacks. So who are these lizard people? We have Justin Bieber, Hillary Clinton, Queen Elizabeth II, Angelina Jolie, Melania Trump, Katy Perry, George W. Bush, Obama, and Mark Zuckerberg himself, who might actually be the leader of them. And who knows, maybe I'm a lizard person as well, and my videos have subliminal messages in them. I guess you'll never know, unless you go rewatch them all. A tragic expedition gone horribly wrong comes onto this list at number 2. So back in the early 1800s, people believed that there was a secret program that hid a race of giant aliens in the Canadian Arctic. I've never heard of this one, Well, these aliens are very knowledgeable and they had the ability to emit high levels of radiation, and they can also levitate heavy objects. An Arctic exploration voyage was set to take place in 1845, but things went horribly wrong. The team stumbled across these aliens, and it is believed that they were being experimented on, and the aliens ate them alive. I guess that would explain why their remains were never found, so could be plausible. And finally, number 1, we have esoteric hitlerism. Well, these people believe that members of the Aryan race come from highly superior alien life forms. Apparently, these alien civilizations came to Earth to teach them about enlightenment and to breed with humans. So these conspiracy theories believe that the only people left with the purity of the alien gene in their blood are Aryans. They also believe that Hitler escaped at the end of World War II and fled to the Arctic, where he's still hiding in a secret underground bunker with these aliens. Far-fetched possibly. Some say that he's patiently waiting in this bunker until he can come back up to the surface to regain his power. Well, I won't be holding my breath waiting for that day to come.
In our number 5 red and brown color, which could potentially be responsible for the color on this moon. The surface temperature might be too cold for them to survive, but the warmer interior might be where they are located. Some geological activity on the moon could then push them closer to the surface, where they are then flash frozen in place.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing. 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft.
In our number 5 spot today, we have They May Already Be Here. Okay, this one is for my conspiracy theorists out there. This is just the theory that maybe we can't find aliens because they've already found us and are actually walking among us, and we just don't know. I'm not quite sure the logistics of this one because I am definitely a human, and no alien who's posing as a human has ever revealed themselves to me personally, but I can't speak for everyone. It's possible that if this is true, aliens might be waiting for the right time to let us know that they've been walking around with us, or there may already be some lucky people out there who already know. I know a lot of us would be quite frightened of aliens if we did find concrete proof of their existence, and it might be likely that they're afraid of us as well. And if they are more intelligent than us and were able to find us first, they might just be testing out the waters to see what humans really think of them before letting us in on their secrets. So if you meet a stranger who starts asking you a bunch of questions about aliens, you might want to think twice next time. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006 and was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for around 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole where you could see the blue sky. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw the same thing. are thinking the same thing. In our number 1 spot today, we have radio signals. Basically, we're getting radio signals from somewhere, but we just aren't quite sure what exactly is going on there. It started in 2007 when we began getting what are called fast radio bursts, and they are a totally mysterious phenomena to scientists. These bursts are only a few milliseconds long, but they emit more energy than the sun does in 24 hours, which is just a statement that my brain struggles to comprehend. All of this is already super cool and very interesting, but here's an even crazier thing about them. The main thing we know about these bursts is that they are coming from outside of the Milky Way. They're coming from outside of our own galaxy. Space is the coolest and most unbelievable thing. This obviously had led a lot of experts to believe that it could be coming from an advanced civilization that is quite far away, and they may be trying to contact us, but we just don't have the technology to interpret the signals. Maybe one day scientists will figure out a way to accept whatever message it is they're trying to send, or maybe one day we'll get a visit from them and they'll be mad at us for not answering their messages. Either way, it's all very cool and very interesting.
The star system where these aliens are supposedly from has been at the center of some of the most famous alien abduction stories in history, including the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. Were these beings from Serpo, Ebens, or Greys, as they're typically called, responsible for abductions like this? The Barney and Betty Hill case is pretty interesting. In September of 1961, this American couple was driving through rural New Hampshire at night when they noticed strange lights in the sky that seemed to be tracking their car's movements. Barney decided to stop the car to get out and have a look, and what he allegedly saw were humanoid figures peering out from a hovering craft. The Hills peeled off as fast as they could, but they later realized they'd lost a pretty hefty chunk of time that they just didn't remember. But as the days passed, they started to remember things. They ended up reporting being taken aboard a UFO where they were subjected to medical examinations by beings described as small, with gray skin, oversized eyes, and tiny little anime mouths, that's the exact way they described it back then. It's a 60s term, anime mouths. Their account was one of the earliest descriptions of the now iconic image of your classic gray alien.
Of course, a regular mission to space is no walk in the park, but a mission to a faraway planet located in a star system entirely separate from our own, that's tough. And apparently so was the training process. It took an entire year of survival, escape, evasions, weapons, and psychological training for the 12 astronauts to become fully prepared for their mission. The crew consisted of scientists, linguists, pilots, 2 doctors, and a security officer. Over the course of a year, along with the standard training, one by one, each member of the crew was buried in a 6 by 5 foot box and kept there for 5 days as part of a training intensive. There was no light, no communication. Just a small air hole that allowed the astronauts to receive food and water and not suffocate to death. It was tough, but they all passed, and the pilots even went on to learn how to operate alien spacecrafts. When it came time to take off, the 12 astronauts, along with 40 tons of gear, which included 10 motorcycles and 3 jeeps, were loaded into the spacecraft using anti-gravity technology, and one even came along to assist in their journey. When the ship was all boarded, each astronaut went to their own individual pod and settled in for the long journey ahead.
All right, before we get to what they saw on that journey, let's have a little bit of fun here and talk about something that comes up more than you'd probably think when Project Serpo or just interactions between aliens and humans is discussed. Hybrids. Yeah, aliens creating human-alien hybrids, either through experimentation or, God forbid, actually getting it on. This kind of thing always feels like it's going down the same rabbit hole that creepy online fan fiction does, where it's like, I'm gonna write about my fantasy of Alf impregnating Willie Tanner. I don't know. I'm not trying to shame, live your lives, but the concept of humans and aliens breeding with each other always feels inherently silly to me. With that said though, this does often play into the Project Serpo conspiracy. Those astronauts were apparently on this planet for a while. Who knows who they met? One thing could have led to another. Plus, in all these reported UFO abduction cases, who knows what kind of nasty experiments those Greys could have been doing.
When the crew arrived at Serpo, the first thing they noticed was that it was barren, bright, and hot. Really hot. About 107 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 degrees Celsius. Quickly, they realized why. Planet Serpo had 2 suns, which are shown here in a photograph taken by one of the astronauts. Allegedly. One of the suns was orbited by Serpo, and the other was off in the distance. Because of this, the planet never got dark, and the days were 40 hours long, meaning that their decade-long mission was actually going to take 13 human years. In total, there are about 650,000 Ebens living on the planet in small, separate village communities and houses made of some kind of concrete rubber substance. It was a primitive life, but at the same time, the Ebens were equipped with electricity and incredibly advanced technology. Families generally consisted of a male and female Eben, and each family was allowed to have a maximum of 2 children, which were hidden away until they reached the age of maturity. During their time on Serpo, the astronauts gathered as much information about the Ebens as they could. And if you guys remember, I do believe I mentioned that one of the astronauts died on transit. Apparently the Ebens used that astronaut to clone and create hybrids of, like James mentioned. And it was then that the remaining astronauts realized that they weren't as peaceful as they once thought them to be. When it came time to return home, for some reason, 2 of the astronauts actually decided to stay, and then 2 more astronauts died on the way back to Earth. The surviving astronauts were given a large sum of money and an entirely new identity. That's great and all, but many of them were suffering from radiation poisoning due to the 2 suns and died soon after their return to Earth.
One of the most avid supporters of the Project Serpo conspiracy is a man named Richard Doughty, who we can't really talk about Serpo without talking about this guy. See, Richard Doughty has made some pretty outlandish claims, so outlandish that there's a whole other conspiracy that spawned around him and other government officials like him. Supposedly, Doughty was the man behind those anonymous emails I talked about earlier. Richard Doughty is a retired special agent who used to work for AFOSI, the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. But a lot of people think he wasn't actually investigating UFOs, but that he was part of a team spreading misinformation. Intentionally, basically muddying the waters and leaking supposedly secret info about the government's exchange program with alien beings in order to confuse the public, making it hard for us to tell what's real or not. Of course, the purpose behind the misinformation is, of course, to distract everyone from the actual nefarious things the government is up to. I mean, who doesn't get excited about aliens, right? I'm sure we'd all rather believe that the worst thing the government is doing is working with extraterrestrials instead of them doing some shady stuff at our own expense. Could there be some genuine truth about the planet Serpo thing? I mean, sure, maybe, but you know, just something to keep in mind with stuff like this.
If you believe in Ebens, I really want to know.
Please let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts.
Yeah, we're not judging, we're just so curious.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll catch you in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about mysterious doors that have been sealed for centuries and what lies behind them. Let's take a peek behind these doors and find out why they were sealed once and for all. Click the video now to find out more.